Welcome to another edition of the Old Parachute Podcast, a podcast where we talk to a wide variety of guests from all walks of life with the ultimate goal of raising awareness for mental health issues amongst the military veterans and emergency services communities. If you haven't already, please go to the YouTube channel and the Instagram channel and give me a follow. It's massively appreciated and it helps push the messages out there far and wide and helps in general more than you realise. Today's guest, former 3 Para and 1 Para Special Forces Support Group and founder of Veterans Volunteer Service, Gary Hart. How you doing, Gary? All right?
Good morning, Chris. Very well, thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on. I always appreciate it. I've always got time for the Airborne Brotherhood, and especially one that's doing amazing things and great things for the veterans community. So thank you for taking the time to come on.
Thank you very much, brother. Been looking
No dramas. No dramas. Well, what I like to do with all the podcasts, I like to kind of get a bit of a background about the guest, kind of what they were like growing up and kind of what led them down the route to joining the military and then kind of down the path that they took after that and basically the things they've done after that. So, yeah, over to you, pal. Whereabouts did you grow up?
Well, I actually grew up in Farnham, Upper Hale, really, in between Aldershot, the Shot and Farnham. It's a very simple answer. I spent most of my childhood up the Queen's Ave with the Red Threads, with my great uncle being in the Pioneer team. So I was lucky enough to think about some of the old legends like Mickey Munn and people like that, Jim Garrett and that. I was lucky enough to even go up in the Islander and watch them jump and that. This is like age 9, 10, 11, all that. It was pretty much in my DNA, all the airborne forces day over there. There's only one route for me, really, and that was Maroon Machine and to go and excel and do it. It was never really a question. It was literally, what I was born to do. So, yeah, that's the reason behind it. And that's why I ended up there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, it is. I think sort of a lot of blokes, it's ingrained into them. The dad was the paratroopers or family members, and that was the route. And then other people sometimes they kind of stumble up on it and then kind of end up in there by accident. Usually, you find a lot with the blokes is they struggled at school, had some sort of issues with the whole schooling system, and then they kind of went down the regiment. It seems to be a common denominator amongst the kind of. Was that the case with you during school, or you find school?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was very good in sport. I was a district champion, sprinter, a very good runner. So all of that was very good. But I didn't have a lot of time for people that I didn't find inspirational. Include, I think there was one point at junior school where I think my mum was told I was the worst student they'd ever come across when it come to sort of like the academic side and being told what to do. At the end of the day, I was also bringing in trophies for sprinting. So it was kind of like that. I guess I listened to my great uncle more than anybody and his mates and his peers and all that. And I do have to. I had a stepdad who was absolutely horrific as well. Who was, I guess, jealous of that kind of thing, which is really my father figure. Then was my great uncle, But I guess also some of that drive and the kind of toughness of resilience come from not a good kind of support network by my supposed father figure as well. But at the end of the day, I can remember when I did last see him and I had passed out and everything, and I was he'd come round to tell my mum that he was unwell and life was going and all that, and I basically literally physically threw him out the garden. So every cloud and all that, and but all those things lead to a way, don't they? But to be honest with you, I spent most of my time up on the old Aldershot train there with my great uncle, learn how to map read, and all that. So it didn't really bother me. I just cracked on with my own detail, really. But I do reflect on what you're saying now, and I do think you, especially in the reg, it's like it finds you. You don't find it. It's something as slightly different, and I will extend that to infanteers and infantry regiments. So I feel that, you know, there is 9 times out of 10, it's not been the perfect background for the lads that end up in those regiments. But I do think through those kind of hardships and stuff is what kind of makes a person that will pass out in those regiments and will be a good soldier anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I agree there. I agree wholeheartedly with what you said. So moving on to depot, it sounds like you kind of had a kind of heads up and one step ahead going into depot. You know, you'd already had a few kind of heads up with the map reading, family members in, you know, knocking around an older shot training noise. So yeah, how did you find the whole? Because it's a bit basic training, phase 2 training, the whole Para Reg training. It's kind of a bit like Marmite in it. I mean, I enjoyed some of it, but I found depot quite hard. I'm quite honest about that. What about yourself? Was it a shock?
Yeah, 100%. Because I suppose I dealt hard with it because I've been around, like I say, blokes that were in battalions, seeing them, you know, first name terms and that, and then I was Joe. It was almost like a more of a bitter pill to swallow, and I think they kind of, you know, because at the end of the day, they're there to produce the same person that comes out, you know, all kind of the same at the end. So they have to find that and they have to press those buttons some way for that process to happen. So it can be used against. It's like the lads that go up there, and if they know that there's family involvement, or lads that have got dads down in Hereford and stuff, you know, they tend to give it to you a little bit more because you have to go through the same suffering as everybody else to get your crown at the end of the training, right? You don't just get called an emperor for no reason, and we all have to suffer to get there. That's part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is suffering. There's no two ways about it. I remember being driven up, my old man giving me a lift back up to Catterick, like, you know, on a Sunday, and that sinking feeling knew what were coming for the week you had, you know, and it was, and you know, I think that's all part and parcel of it. So yeah, obviously you got through depot. What year was this, Gary? Did you join?
So that was 99.
Okay, so a couple of years. We'd have been knocking around the same time. I was 97 when I joined. So you would have done Lichfield as basic and then phase 2 at Catterick. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's weird. I don't know if I can expand on that. Like, one thing that comes from depot that's been quite amazing in life is Hammy Willits. Mark Willits was my screw in phase 1, and then went on. And when I got sent to Free Para 2006, you know, obviously I've been in one para before I went 2006. Blokes got out for the CP. There was numbers, problems, all the rest of it, as you know. Anyway, I went up, and lo and behold, I ended up going to B Company, and then Mark Willits was a company sergeant major. He literally screwed the nut, got me out on the ground the next day without the acclimatization onto an op and all that sort of stuff. And we ended up basically fighting, like going into an ambush with each other on the ground. There was a 14-hour kind of firefight battle. And that's when we Kazivac Paddy Cordwell together. And even now, and credit to Mark, I've got to say that because I have absolute respect for him. He's one of my personal mentors, is the way I see it. Still in touch with him, and he went all the way through from private to colonel, and he's now just out. We're still in touch, and you know, he's great. He supports as well from a distance. He's a very busy man, but he's somebody that I must give a shout out to, and literally all my respect. He's a top class bloke. Yeah.
Oh, happy days. Well, maybe a future guest for the podcast as well. You could point him in my direction. That'd not be a bad one.
Yeah.
So rewind a little bit. You've come out of depot straight to battalion. So you got to battalion like 1999.
Yeah.
And then straight on a tour, you said, or was that pretty much?
So, I went to Northern Ireland with one para, and I believe it was like the last drum cree type thing as well. So I spent it was a really good tour actually, because we were down in Crossmaglen, you know, we're down in Keady, like all the, so there was it was a nice hard tour. And that's what you want, because you know what it's like when you get into battalion. You think about, you want your tattoo, you want your reg ring and that, but there's no way you're getting it until you've actually done something, and it's got to be something of substance and that. And lucky enough, that tour, with the last drum crew and everything, was enough, to then kind of be accepted into the battalion, where you're not Hart anymore and all that, and you're Gaz, and and then you become finally a Joe, a Tom, and you're actually then bedded in the battalion. You feel like you've won the lottery in a way. So that was my first tour, and it was really good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it is that people will find probably that are not from our kind of background may find it a little bit hard to kind of understand that acceptance when you get in. It's almost like, I suppose it is like a lot of jobs. You got to prove yourself. The blokes have got to trust you. You got to know that you're not a muppet, and that you're good at what you do as a paratrooper. So, like you say, I was lucky enough, very, very similar. I came straight out of Dapper, straight on a Northern Ireland tour in 1998. And after that 6-month tour, it was like, right, you can have a overhang in your berry. You can go and get a reg. I went and got 2. You know what I mean, as you do in Aldershot. And you felt like a belonging. And I always say, what makes the Parachute Regiment is almost like cult like. You're scared.
Yeah.
You're part of like a big brotherhood, and that's difficult for people to get their heads round. And it's a club that once you're part of for the rest of your life. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and that's why I'm glad all those things are there. I'm glad you don't just get out of depot, or even starting before that, you don't get your lid until you've earned it. Yeah, and then it gets worse from there. Then you've got to do the lobs. Then you've got to get to battalion, and then you carry more weight and it's longer tabs, and and then you go somewhere like Ireland, and reflecting on what's going on as well, sort of like politically around that. It's shocking, really, because it is a hard place to soldier. It is a really hard place to soldier because it looks like home, right? And in one street it is, and then in one street it's not. And it's so I actually think it's a really good place to cut your teeth. I feel really honoured to get my Northern Ireland medal. In a way, I feel it's one that's like slightly overlooked now, and it shouldn't be. It's a tough place to soldier. You have to be thinking on your feet all the time, and anything that looks normal could be threatening. So, I'm proud to have been there.
That's a very good point, actually, with the Northern Ireland, because you look back at it. Obviously, you would have done the later tours. You'd done the Afghan tours and stuff, where you're in a desert that feels a million miles away from home, so you can kind of switch on and not switch on, but you're in like soldier mode because you're in a different terrain. But that is exactly that. Walking around the streets of Northern Ireland is like walking around any city or any town on the mainland in England, the UK, and it's a very, very difficult one. And for the people that are watching this that are non-military, fighting and operating in built-up areas, Fibula or Obura, as it was later called, I don't even know what it's called nowadays, but operations in built-up areas is one of the hardest environments to kind of work in, because there's so many elevated and possible enemy positions and places for IEDs and stuff. So, coupled with what you just said there about it was really easy to become complacent because it feels like you're walking around a town. So I think you're right there. It does, over the years, it's overlooked. And, like we talk about the political situation where veterans are now being kind of prosecuted for stuff that happened 20, 30 years ago. You think that you can't judge someone if you were never there and never under that pressure,
That's exactly what it comes down to. As well as going, it's just outrageous, really. The government has asked you to be there, and then they're prosecuting you for being there, and yet they would not understand a threat of any type of that if it presented themselves 2 foot away from them and said, "I'm a threat." It's like we're the professionals doing it, and do it extremely well. And so I'm definitely a champion of all those that are trying to fight against those prosecutions and stuff happening, and let alone the fact they're then handing out piles of money for people that used to call themselves some sort of army as well. I just think it's It's they need to get a grip, to be honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So moving on from the island tours, where kind of did you go after that? Was you say initially 3 para went for to start with, and then you went?
No, so basically, Chris, I was 1 para. So my first was Ireland, and then the first Iraq. So 2003. So not Gulf War 1, but Iraq 2003, the invasion. So I was there. We actually landed right near what they call DS7 now, which is where a lot of the CP runs out in the Rumaila sort of area, just out of Basra. We were there. We went up there, and then ended up in Baghdad in a multiple where we were looking after the old embassy right in the middle of Baghdad, and there was quite a bit of hearts and minds going on there. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because that tour for that was so important for the development of who I am now to what I do as a person in the Veterans Volunteer Service, and part of why the success of it and how it works is built from that hearts and minds type of service as well, which is just as important as anything deliberate or anything offensive. It's an important way of establishing sort of like militia and help and stuff in areas. So I learned a lot on that, by being in that multiple and going up and doing that in Baghdad as well. So there was a lot out of that tour. As well.
Yeah, again, and we take nothing away from the Iraq tours. I suppose a bit like the island, I suppose every conflict that happens, the kind of ones before that fade, and I think Iraq probably got overshadowed by again what happened in Afghanistan. We know the brutal fight in Afghanistan, which we will come on to, shortly with yourself. But the Iraq tours, people forget how obviously I worked out there for a number of years. They forget how hostile and how bad Iraq was. From 2003, 2004, and 2006 was historically a really, really bad year as well out there. So I think it kind of gets overshadowed a little bit, but with Afghanistan, would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because what happened really was a huge, well-armed coalition force, went in, done the invasion roughly a month, and the Iraqi army, they pretty much rolled over, but all they done was took off uniforms, put on civilian clothing, and then formed an insurgency. And so again, and it was a bit reflective of Northern Ireland at the beginning. That absolutely chuffed you were there. The coalition, we're all English and American now, we're all Brits and American. Open arms welcome. And you could see it changing in atmospherics as it was going. That obviously, the insurgency and their militias, they didn't want that change. They didn't want that westernization. And so there was stuff that was happening, honor killings, punishments and stuff like that. And it didn't take long for that to become present out there. So even in that first tour from the invasion to then by the end of that sort of 6-7 months when we left, you could see that it was kind of tipping in their social groups as well, fairly quickly. So you're right. And then when there's nothing worse than an enemy who you don't know who it is because you can't identify them. Like if you get orders, uniforms, weapons, or if you can't identify that, it means it's everywhere. So, I wouldn't take anything away from those tours like that because it's equally as dangerous because it's not so traditional. It's you just don't know who is a threat at the end of the day, particularly when sort of like kids and women and stuff can also be present in stuff like clacking off a suicide vest or playing ID and stuff like that. It's it changed rapidly, and when it did, it was definitely one of the most violent places on the planet in history. So I've got full respect for anybody that's got that gong as well.
Yeah, it is. In kind of, I remember for a period of time, they were hiding IEDs in dead dogs and stuff at the side of the road, you know, and you just you couldn't kind of really. It's something you can train for it in a way where you keep switched on and observant, but you know, a lot of it was like luck of the draw, because an IED could be anywhere, couldn't it? And that's how it was. So if you worried about it, and every time you went out on the ground you thought about it, you'd be a nervous wreck. You just had to kind of take it as it came, didn't you?
Yes, exactly, mate. Exactly that. And you know, and then it was his own thing as well. And then obviously the start of the close protection, hostile close protection industry really out there. And yeah, there was all sorts going on, you know, and I saw it. Obviously, went back in 2007 to Iraq, but then you know, that was with the SFSG in support of A Squadron. So we got a lot of int, we got a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of things happening in sort of like against British American soldiers, CP companies, all the rest of it. It was a Wild West, mate. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with multiple guys. It was, for the early days, it was the Wild West. It was lawless. There was, you know, there was no rules of engagement, because they couldn't be, because you were getting attacked left, right, and centre. So it was still warfare, but almost like with a private army, a close protection army, you know, with very little support. So I mean, it was a difficult industry to operate. The guys that went out there, they kind of they know that, and you know, veterans know that in general, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, moving on, obviously, from the Iraq tours and that. Now, I want to talk to you about, obviously, you went over and you served over in Afghanistan, in Kajaki. You know,
Yeah.
infamously, kind of, we know there's a film out called Kajaki that talks about kind of the incident involving Mark Wright and various other bits and bobs. So, yeah, I mean, to talk me through that, because you was on that tour, wasn't you?
Yes, I was. So basically, joined. They'd been there for I think about a month and a half by the time I was sent out. So I went out basically with a couple of officers young officers straight out of Sandhurst that were going out, and some lads straight out of depot. Had very little kind of training for that. I got there; they'd all been through the package. I'd already served, been on tours. That's it, kind of, and just needed, you know, that I think at that point a company had been in Sangin, and the brutality and the penny was dropping of like casualties getting taken, blokes getting lost, you know, getting killed and stuff. And so we went, and it was like, well, he's from here, you know. Bearing in mind, I'd been in a rifle company, but I'd been in one paramotors predominantly, and you know, I was sent. First of all, they were like, "Well, we should send him up to Kajaki," you know, which is where I was almost going to go as part of the mortars. But I ended up, as I say, Mark Willett sort of like, "Oh, it's you lunatic. You know, you can, you know, get with us, and you'll come to my company, and we're going out tomorrow." So I didn't even. There was no like 11 days of acclimatization. Now I met the platoon and Sergeant Cordwell and yeah, and the 5 platoon B company. And what I will say is, I've to this date, and I've worked with all sorts of high-end soldiers, which I'll go into later. But that platoon was the most professional group of lads I have ever spent time with and been around. I was almost gutted to go back to one para, because I was so embedded with them. But I guess that's kind of what we went through on the ground. And even though, so Era's got me grenades, got all my mags bombed up and all that, we're out, we land in, and I can remember Mark Willett's being there. We were on the Chinook going in, and he's like, look at the ground. And in my mind, because I'd just been Bastion landed the night before, I was like, I wasn't expecting what was going to happen. This is going to be like Iraq. We're going to land, like, we're going to get off. No, man, that's not what happened. We landed. We got into the thing. We all formed up, one knee and that. John Hardy's on the thing, fixed bayonets. I never heard that. Like, what, you know, bayonet on. We go out. We tap across the marketplace, and then it comes over the ice. That, like, literally, we're surrounded. They're surrounding us, and bang, it happened. And 14 hours There was a massive fight to the point where we ran out of ammunition. And as I say, at one point in that casualty, we were in near the Chinese building, they call it, in Sangin. It's got a roof that looks a bit Building 9, I think. And basically, Paddy Caldwell been shot through the neck on top of the roof during a firefight with a platoon. The bullet went through one side out, ricocheted off the wall, and then went in just under the armpit, under his body armour, and into his lung. Then Corporal Jackson took over the platoon and got the military cross for it. Another top lad, Jacko, and it commenced. But by that time, me and Hammy, it always seems different to me. It seems like we went about 20 meters. It wasn't. We went about 190 meters across very heavy fire through it, and that was grenades, small mortars, and small arms fire from the Taliban. And all I can remember is quick battle orders of like, we're going to leg it and we're just going to hammer into it, right? So I can remember magazine on full automatic, just blatting into the cornfield at the bottom. I could see two green turbans cutting their way through the cornfield at the bottom. So aimed into that. By the time we got to the bottom, there was like a deep irrigation ditch full of those bastard bushes, they're called. They're like dry, hideous, prickly bushes. That's unfortunately what happened to take my cover into, and then landed on a snake. So it was like one of those moments here. It was like pretty horrendous. Anyway, we dashed down and crawled across the ditch, could see Paddy Caldwell. He was laying there and he was going grey. Got over to him, couldn't really identify. I was like, is that it? There didn't seem to be like an exit wound. It just seemed like two small entrance wounds. But however, could see there was blood under here. So basically what I did was got the hemosil out and just tried to plug these two. All right. There was a quad bike with a small trailer which had like a mortar rounds in it. I got him onto there, like made sure he was comfortable with like maintaining a fire position. And that's how we went back across the ground, still under the same problems that we had done. And I know my good friend Suri Kuluanu was a sniper on another roof down there at the time. Basically, how you and Hammy were not hit, because I saw it, or you just literally everything was around you. We could hear it. It wasn't even crack and thump. It was literally, and you could kind of hear it. But at the time, you kind of have like a time lapse. It's like, because I guess the amount of adrenaline, and then adrenaline's to your fight or your flight or whatever you're doing. With us, it went into full paratrooper aggression, and we just hammered into what we could see, you know. From what I've been, pretty much, I guess if it had been another tour at any time, there'd have probably been awards for this, but it was just part and parcel of what was happening at Sangin. You know, Sangin was, proper war fighting, and that's what it was. But that was my proper baptism to fire to date on that, if that makes sense. And then we had to basically try and get ourselves back to the compound. Blokes ditching water and everything, like anything they could to be faster on their feet, because everybody was running out of ammunition as well. As I say, this was like 14 hours into it, but it was really thumpy, man. But it was, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it for the world, you know.
And it's a weird bit, that's that kind of that paratrooper, well, not paratrooper, kind of soldier mentality.
Yeah.
It's hard for people that don't, or have never been in the military or have never been a soldier, to get their head around why, like that's crazy. You wouldn't dream of it, but that's what soldiers want to do. Obviously, in the moment, it's scary. You're like, oh God, I want this to be over, and then it's over, and you're like, that was awesome, kind of thing, isn't it? It's one of them things.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And yeah, definitely with infantry guys, and I'll go into this later, and that's why we our main focus is on those guys, because if you think about the job of soldiering, the trade is actually soldiering. That is what it is. It's a fighting soldier. So the infanteers and attachments to that, I am going to say that the guys that do the commando courses or the airborne courses and everything, again, these are the people that we are trying to process to then have an employable title with their skill sets. So, but going back to helming and sanging and everything, I don't know whether I was just loving it a bit too much, because I went back down there with C Company as well to sanging, and Hammy let me go, because I was kind of B Company, and then back. This is when B Company were back in Bastion, and I went back down there with C as well, and was there for the rip over to the Royal Marines, which again kicked right off, and was lucky enough to go on the ground a bit with Tom Beckett, who was sadly killed and died. But out with his platoon a bit, setting ambushes and stuff in the orchard, which is well known behind the compound, and singing and doing all that really old school stuff. And another really alley thing I do have to say, and somebody else who I have total respect with, is Martin Hewitt, Captain Hewitt. So he was our platoon commander with in B Company there. And after that day, I'd kind of spoken about the sanging day. It was quite an infamous story that the RAF, unfortunately, dropped all our resups into the Taliban side of the ground.
I did hear that. I did hear that. Yeah.
And we actually went out and with no radios and done the first actual full hand signal mission to go and get eyes on since the Second World War. And he led that, and he's a great leader. And he also has adaptive Grand Slam now. He was shot in Afghanistan as an SFSG officer, really damaged lung. And he cycles from like Newfoundland to Mexico and stuff for charity. He's absolutely, a dynamo of infantry regiment spirit, and a true friend and great leader, man. So he's another person I must give a shout out to.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Like I say, that whole, I never went on any of them tours, but I have had enough guys on now that talk about them tours. With kind of fond memories, and also kind of the long lasting kind of memories and bad memories that obviously they come from them sort of them operations. What I want to talk to you about, obviously, we talk about the Kajaki, we talk about, like I say, the film, the incident involving Mark Wright. I have been in contact with Paul Tug Hartley, who was obviously the medic, with a view to getting him on the podcast at some point. But talk me through that, kind of, for the people that don't know about the story, kind of summarize the story and kind of what happened for me, if you would.
Okay, I'll start with what the event were and then explain our platoon's part in it. Okay, so Kajaki, there was a multiple up there, and I believe they were there to kind of oversee where the Taliban kept setting up a VCP, a vehicle checkpoint, and they were kind of trying to control the ground there. So they were having, skirmishes with them and their own problems up there. But actually, it was getting right towards the end of the tour now, and with our platoon, we were the initial reaction team, duty team. So we thought it was going to be a bit of a chill out day back at Bastion, and lo and behold, we got to go because Jackie, there's a problem there. Of course, what we then found out was one of the Stews, he had Stu Hale had gone down to get more eyes on with a team, on the vehicle checkpoint. And through time and history, from the Russian war, there had been mines that had been washed down through weather down into the bottom of the wadi. And obviously they walked into it, and then disaster, kind of unveiled itself. And, through all the lads that got hit on it and stuff, this is probably the cause of why I ended up in combat stress myself, why I ended up in Jackson House. And I think it's because I didn't know the blokes. I was from one part, I didn't know the blokes. For me, it was really hard to have a connection to it, and the connection came a few years after the event. But from my eyes, what happened was, there we are, we're going out to Kajaki, and the air support we would get, well, the airlift we were given was a Chinook. We went in. As we closed in and we were coming in, you could see them. They're kind of down at the bottom of the wadi there, and you could see other guys sporadically kind of up the wadi and the multiple kind of thing. We went to land right as close as we could, and of course the propeller downwind caused downdraft, and the ground there was sand but also grit, so it was kind of slinging everywhere. And what actually happened at that point was Mark went to cover his face and he rolled onto the second mine. So that went off. So that's what we saw from the tailgate. And we were like, fuck, we cannot do this. So again, Martin Hewitt, get us over the top of the hill to the other side of Wadi. And then the blokes literally 2-miled it with all the kit up over the top of it at fast speed, which again shows the importance of stuff like that, why it's in P Company and stuff. Raging heat and all that, adrenaline going, not knowing if there was any more threat. At that point, nobody really knew what the threat was. We just know blokes getting blown up. And I actually went up then on another quad with Tomo from the platoon. We like, get out there, Gaz, take him out, see if you can get eyes on. There's a few medical qualifications as well. So we went up, and we couldn't get on there. We could see what was happening because there was other injured lads, like with more blast of shrapnel injuries, but weren't actually in the base of the wadi. So we can't do that, So then I went back over, and then I was with Des Barnes, who was the multiple sergeant up there. He's a 3-para sergeant. And the Black Hawk, by this time, everybody knows from the movie, was landing. This brave American bloke was, right down on the ground, getting them onto the plate, and then back up onto the Black Hawk, and flying one at a time back over to near where the Chinook was landed. And it was me and Des Barnes that were taking each bloke at a time off of that, and then getting them on to the Chinook for more stabilisation. The injuries were horrific, and I'm glad to be spending. I haven't seen the two stews since that day, but they're out on an event at the end of June, which I'll talk about a little bit down the line. I haven't seen them since then, but was taking them off, and the injuries, as I say, were horrific. They're missing limbs and everything. And Mark, bless him, was in a bad way. It has his first initial blast, which had taken a limb, and then he'd rolled on. There was a lot of damage up one side in a graphic way, but these things need to, the memory of like how brave he was really keeping the blokes alert, keeping them motivated and everything is total bravery, and you could see his ribs, man. His ribs were open. You could see his lung. It was like when I got him off, he weighed so little because so much was kind of not there, and it was liver up, and everything. And we were the last two Reg blokes to see him alive, I believe. It was like, I've had issues with that. I found myself at some points in life, like literally shouting Mark into the sky and stuff. I said, I knew him no more than that brief encounter, but it's something that will be with me for the rest of my life. His memory will be, and it's, I'll tell you a bit more once we go into the VBS side of life. It's something that we're continuing to remember and push out there. So Kajaki was a very unique, very special kind of thing to have happened, and all those involved should hold their heads high, and there should be respect around them. But it is also a thing that has brought a lot of aftermath issues with lads.
Yeah, it's bound to, isn't it? And it's whether you were close to that person or not, it's another human that kind of you have that bond with, that kind of served in the same unit as you. Like we talked about that, Lord. It's like losing sort of a family member, losing a brother, and it is difficult to process. And and some guys do struggle, some guys don't. No one knows. like as you move through life, what you're going to struggle with, and that's the very, very tricky thing about all these kind of issues that we talk about them, and that what we try and raise awareness to is what might affect you might not affect me, and vice versa.
Yeah,
So people do criticize stuff at times and say, well, I was on that tour and it didn't bother me, but people's brains are different, perceptions
yeah,
different. Your level of what you can take, and that is completely different. So yeah, it's a tricky one, and it is a sensitive topic, and there will be people watching this and going, well, that's a bit graphic. Surely you shouldn't be saying stuff like how graphic it was. But I agree with you there, because it's all right seeing stuff in a movie. It's all right hearing about or even reading about it. But when you talk about the kind of what you saw and the effects that it's had on you and stuff, I think that makes it more real, than people can
yeah.
understand that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And the film obviously had its place. So we were contacted. We all sort of like had to give little testimonials about what we saw on the day. And I guess through budget and time and all the rest of it, there was only so much they could do. But there was a lot more happening. But then again, I'm glad that the focus was actually on the blokes that were in the wadi, because it deserves to be. So, yeah, and I just want it to be that, because, it's, Mark should be, like forever remembered, with the Mackays, and with the everybody else that's got big medals, man. He should be, it was extremely brave to go through that. Hell of a resilience going on down there with those. Yeah,
Absolutely, pal. Absolutely, and like I say, I'm sure he will be remembered. As well as all the other guys that have kind of sadly lost their lives in kind of the line of duty, if you like. So obviously, the Kajaki tour continued, and Afghanistan and stuff, and then you moved on. Was this a period of time after that tour you then went back to Para? Is that right?
yeah. Right, really quick. So we got back for Pottle post-operational leave, I think, in November of 2006, and I deployed again from St Athens in March 2007. And in between all that period, we also had to do our CT training, relevant around that, the continuation training with the SAS squadron you're attached with, to then be able to deploy. So we've gone down, and how it works is that, well, at the time, 2 and 3 para would be asked to send an allocation of a certain amount of blokes twice a year, and then some blokes from the SG would then go back to those battalions. And the idea was it's slowly but surely building up kind of one big SFSG, around the tier 1 SF units. And I think now it's slightly more difficult. I think you can put in to go there from infantry regiments all across the board, and you do a cadre and whatever. But that's how it was at the time, in my time of it. And so we went down there, met the squadron, and then we deployed, out to Baghdad. We were right in the middle of near Camp Liberty, and what was Uday Hussein's wives' houses, 10 of them, was the special community there. So you had like Delta, Rangers, SAS, SFSG, MI6, CIA, all the rest of it. And all the ops were kind of being launched from there 9 times out of 10 when the curfew kicked in. So you were living your life really at night, and going out in different forms to whatever the target was, and all the around that, and then dealing with those certain targets to keep that ball rolling, and slowly but surely bringing that percentage of Al Qaeda down. So that's what it was.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, when you say that, I won't name sort of operations and stuff like that, but you kind of then went on, was part of SFSG when you were kind of looking for the team that were kidnapped. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Was
Again,
one of the members, was that the Al McMenemy?
Yes,
Yeah,
it was indeed.
yeah.
So
I knew Al very well from Para. So
right, okay. So well, this is an interesting thing then, Chris. So there we were. We'd been out doing our ops, whatever. Normally got back, had a bit of scoff, slept a bit through the day, and then prepare for whatever was going out and however you were doing it the next time. Sometimes you'd bounce on, do 2 or 3, depending, what had happened in the particular raids. And in that whole time, there was I think approximately 136 raids. There's a lot of raids going in, and it came over the tannoy, stand by for da da da. What's that? TL was up to the briefing room, went up. They had the pictures of the lads, and like, anybody know any of these? People were sort of like recognising a couple of the blokes. And then, well, basically, in under an hour ago, these were lifted, blah, 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 with a computer sort of guru who was there to track the money. There was a lot of money going missing at the beginning when they had the cratefuls of dollars and that, millions of pounds of dollars sort of going missing. So he was there to kind of track that. Obviously, certain pockets in the infrastructure out there didn't want that. So it was kind of like, I suppose, an in-house, in my take on it, this is my take on it, like an in-house kind of job. The way it was set up, I mean, they had coach loads of people dressed like trainee policemen. They put a cordon in around the building.
the big thing when it was well prepared.
Yeah. The lift went in, and they were gone. But we were out on the ground in under an hour from that. And we went into a place called Sada City that's in Baghdad. And it's an absolute, it is a hellhole, mate. And well, it's like close alleyways, dead horses in the street, bloody open sewages. It's an absolute, we went out, done this raid. I think from what had been found, we'd missed, Alan by very close DNA on the cigarette, and but it sort of bounced on that. Unfortunately, on the extraction, we were hit with a daisy chain ID down the road. I think there was nearly 40 explosions. And by the time they were lobbing grenades off the roof and everything as well, it was absolutely carnage, man. All you could see was orange. This was night. It's gone into night by now. Got night vision on. Everything is bright orange. And you have to make a decision as a TL when you're hammering it along in your vehicles. Keep going and trusting that the ones in front of you are. Do you know what I mean? So you kind of you just have to go for it. And that sort of set the pace for that particular thing that we're doing. Because the nature of it become a very kind of nondescript, obsolete type of mission after that. Loads of different mixed sort of uniform, and if they were writing about it in the Iraqi press, who is this danger squad that keeps going into, so that we don't know where they're from type thing. And in fact, we were stopping a long way out and then just going in on foot and stuff at night. It was absolutely out there, man. But I have been in touch with a couple of the widows. I wanted to assure them that people tried their best, because I know the information they were getting from kind of British government and the company to which the guys were employed by was poor, to say the least. And I did get in touch with them to kind of brief them up about how the efforts that were made and what that meant in our terms. So hopefully it brought a bit of reassurance in some sort of terms to them,
No, absolutely. And, for the people, again, that won't have worked in kind of Parachute Regiment teams and obviously have probably not been in the military, when it's one of your own, it is a different story. And obviously we know Al McMenemy, it's well publicised, it's been in the papers, was obviously ex-Para Reg. I think there was a few other ex-Reg blokes in that team that got kidnapped, and some other units. And when it's a part of the Brotherhood, or whether it's just a veteran in general or a soldier, everyone does their utmost, and they push it, don't they? They push it to the point probably of exhaustion. And like you say, you would have pushed it harder on the danger levels because you want to find this person, you want to save that person's lives. And sadly, obviously, the efforts that everyone put in would have been absolutely mammoth and immense, but sadly the outcome was what it was, and like you say, it probably could have never been changed, that outcome. You know, it's well prepared, like you say, people probably maybe on the inside. So yeah, it's a sad outcome, but I think, you know, people generally in certain circles definitely will know the efforts that were put in, you know, were involved.
Yes, yeah, exactly that, and that's about all you can really go with that one, really. But yeah, it's sad, but I am glad I reached out to a couple of the widows there.
Absolutely, pal. Absolutely, and fair play to you for doing that. You know, no one probably asked you to do that. That's off your own back, and you know that. I think that's genuinely a nice thing to do, and that kind of shows again what sort of person you are, which takes us on sort of nicely into, you know, kind of why you formed the Veterans Volunteer Service and what it is you do. So yeah, I mean, after the kind of, was that towards the end of your career? Then what year did you leave, Gary?
Yeah, so 2008. That was I you know, felt I had done as much really as far as I wanted to kind of go. And plus my ears were starting to play havoc on me, to be honest with you. You know, there's a lot of explosive entries and stuff that I was close to, and you know, Helmand before that. So it was just one of those things. I wasn't MD'd. I signed off myself, but you know, my ears would have caught me up anyway, if that makes sense. So, and there we have it. So, before I do move on, another person which has been an inspiration both as a soldier, as a friend, and just as a personality is Matt Hellier. You know, been on the ground, Matt, and he has supported me in every way possible, as a person, as a friend, and I think the inspiration behind a lot of the VVS as well comes from conversation and stuff with Matt. When we were at the beginning, he helped us. He gave us some kit and equipment, borrowed our minibus and all that to do our very first youth focus group. Was fairly inspirational on the fit and feeds and stuff, and even to now, you know, I think the Bandit, there's some crossover coming out on the, you know, the SOM project, Refill Your Boots, at the end of June. He's a top guy. He's one of those that we all respect him, really. And, you know, he's a top bloke. So thank you, Matt. And I just wanted to get that one out there as well. So the VVS, when I was working doing CP out in Iraq, started to fit like a real sort of sense of cabin fever and stuff, and you know, and getting a bit twitchy and that. But it turns out really what is manifestation of like worrying about some of the stuff I suppose that I've been involved with out there catching me up or being kind of found out. So you're a bit kind of worrying, you know. A lot of these companies are there to make money, and their kind of infrastructure within that. The blokes are brilliant, but I'm talking about policies and things like that, and the shareholders and stuff. They're not really, you know, there's not a great support system for stuff or identification of stuff like this. And there's lads out there that probably, you know, if we look at resettlement, what does that mean? How does that work? You know, one day your number and your rank or whatever you are and your regiment, next day you haven't really got a clue what you're doing, and you've been given a couple of a week's course and off you go, mate. So this is like the Veterans Volunteer Service is kind of a challenge of re-establishing how that should work. Firstly, so I ended up in Jackson House, got in touch with Matt, went up the Traff. You know, I was sort of like, has anybody got any work going? I've been in touch with Matty Hellier, got in touch with Matt, ended up doing a good job, going to Cuba, Switzerland, all that, and like mentoring a young adult whose wealthy father wanted him to do national service in the Swiss Army before he goes on and has his life, whatever. And so Matt squared me away with that. It was great, kind of got me back in the room and re-establishing life again and out of Jackson House, and which does a great job for people that need it, but it's not, there's a cap.
Yeah. Might not know what Jackson House is. Can you just sort of expand on what Jackson House is?
Yeah, Jackson House is a place in Aldershot where basically General Mike Jackson set up. It's kind of supporting living to re-establish yourself if you've done what we hear, unfortunately, blokes do all the time. Don't engage with things, don't talk, end up going a bit wayward, and you know, kind of need that help to get some courses and stuff like that. You get like a little sustainable flat within the building. There's obviously blokes there that you can talk to and all that. And it doesn't that well with that. But obviously it was in Aldershot, and I went up there to poke my head in to see who was in there. And that's where my re-establishment really started. And that was being put onto Matt and his Vet's Next Step sort of program and that. And then his Security by Sparta, where I ended up working. And that got me sort of back in the room. And from there, I came down to West Sussex. But I was still on that kind of getting myself back sorted to... you have a loss of identity. If you've been in the military and you've got a title number, if you leave, no matter where you're from, you have a loss of identity. Depending on what the nature of your job has been, so I see infanteers, their loss of identity is massive, because it's not like that you can walk down to the local job centre and go, look, I'm really good on mortars and 50 cal gimpy, and I can throw a grenade and I can give all it. It's like really hard, yeah, unless you want to do the CP. But obviously the CP, I was feeling like kind of burnt out with that, because I was continuing to go to a place where I'd had a military footprint. So it was quite hard. And so Jackson House, that's what it is. As I say, Matty, then I squared myself down here in Sussex. And again, not going into names and details. I'm not here to, but I am here to highlight things, but not destroy things, I was put with a local organisation and a mentor who, this is why vetting is so important, was actually a completely fabricated character, a Walter Bloater, whatever people want to use the terms for. I was led to believe he was a legendary shaky SB and everything else, and it turned out, in actual fact, he had done 22 years behind the door for a horrific crime, and it was all false. And obviously, I didn't sit well with me. I'd invited this organisation, this person into my personal life, family, and everything, and I just felt really betrayed with like how that can happen. I don't think these people understand the knock-on effect it can have to somebody that has actually done serious service. I believe there should be valor, stolen valor laws around it and stuff. It's so that happened. I ended up finding out the truth and getting that presented to this particular organisation. They still tried to cuff it and say that they had been employed as a mercenary, because and all the rest. And again, it was all fabricated. Saw them taking a salute with a disabled Royal Marine next to him on a cenotaph, and that was the final point for me, where I'm going to highlight this, because this is really wrong on any standard. You're taking money from the public, and you got people like that in your organisation where it's going to. It's wrong. So highlighted all of that, and I thought, because in my actual area, then the veteran community had been kind of ripped apart and shattered by this. There was little pockets starting, arguments, all that. I thought, what is a veteran? Let's look at this. There's three parts to it. There's the welfare side, which we're there to support everybody and their families that come under the veteran title. There's the pride, where you're proud and your identity, and how can we still keep that identity. And there's the duty side, because we all walked through the door at some point, took our oath, and we were civvies before that, and then we're civvies after that. But we've still got that pride, the attachment to that. So started a gym through Lee Matthews, British Military Martial Arts, down in Littlehampton. Okay. Again, great support, great shout out to Lee, top bloke as well. Still in comms with him. We're still looking at doing things involved with the VBS and his company as well. And now it's my turn.
On the podcast. Yeah, we have had on the podcast as well before.
And it's my turn to try and support him back now, and all this. And this is how the ball keeps rolling. And so there we are. Got the gym open. It's all going swimmingly. And a local businessman that we know is well regarded in our town was attacked in the high street by 11 young adults. Okay, 17 years old, knocked unconscious, threw bottles out and kicked him on the floor and everything. This led the public absolutely terrified to walk down their own high street. Businesses started to suffer, all the rest of it. That businessman came to me and he said, Gaz, can you turn this situation, do you think, into a positive? And I was like, let me have a think about that. I thought, do you know what? I can do a local Hearts and Minds campaign, right? So I rounded up the lads, rounded up their parents, and I said, to stop this escalating any further, where there be retaliation or anything else, and let alone the public thinking that their town is unsafe and everything, I'm going to start a focus group on these, and I'm going to change their characters so they understand community responsibility. Everybody laughed. 12 weeks later, okay, there we are. Bearing in mind that a lot of these kids were involved in what we call alternative provision colleges, where they've been taken out of mainstream education for antisocial behaviour, and it's kind of like a more supported role around that behaviour. Some of that behaviour has to be understanding, discipline, they have to be inspired, okay, and they have to be motivated, not just put in a room with a colouring book and crayons at the age of 17, because that's only going to make you angry, and everything else. So what we done was built this resilience program, and through different scenarios and training, pulled in from veterans. So I pulled in a load of infantry veterans, also some Signals Regiment, who's one of our advisors, Fred Searle. I think he was early days of 14 Int set up and stuff like that. Absolutely amazing, man. And they turn out and we build this program, okay? I founded it and designed it. Poppy, our CEO, put it into motion, where things I don't know about, the techie side of life, grants, writing things, being a total support and everything else like that. Absolutely golden. And we made this work. And out of all of that, we got 2 of them back into mainstream education. 3 of them went on to look at joining the army, and the rest never appeared again on the antisocial thing with the police or anything, right? So then the local council and stuff wanted us to then go into the local comprehensive high school, where we go in and we've done the resilience program there. Again, at the end of it, in the recall, or in the requal, who would want to do this again and get involved with the VBS? 100% of them, right? So the next cohort was 30 kids, and then we got other schools. So where we're at now with it is we also, on the welfare side, designed our Refill Your Boots program. This is where that loss of identity, first of all, we re-establish that. And we do it by the Refill Your Boots out in the Somme. And the reason we go to the Somme to do this is not only my great-grandfather was there, it's the most known, notorious, biggest, greatest war of all time. It's to help the preservation of that. It's to help that stay as it is. So we're lucky enough to have captured the ear of like companies like the Somme Association, the Fetfell Tower, and all the rest of it out there. We took our first time we'd done it. It was around really a veteran who had been shot in Afghanistan in a compound that then the Taliban took. They were preparing to execute him. His platoon done a grenade attack back in to get him out. And obviously he left with quite bad post-traumatic stress disorder. His life changed. His life was just spiraling out of control. And so I formalised the Refill Your Boots program. This is where we kind of engage slowly but surely, where he was having nothing to do with any organisation. Don't want to know. I am who I am. All the rest of it. Got him out to the Somme. We visit certain important key graves out there, like Captain Neville, the football, encouraged the lads to kick the footballs up towards the German graves. First one to get it in gets an award and all that. Danzig Alley, all these places. But most importantly, we do the 20-mile tab of the front line on the 1st of July when the offensive was launched. This year, we're doing it with 2 logs. So we're doing a bit of a log bang out there. As I say, half the lads that are going on it have got prosthetic legs. It's going to be, we're documenting, we've got a film crew going out. It's going to be amazing. And what I know will happen is the conversation amongst the blokes is something that you can't even get at the places that kind of already exist, because it's not just for those type of blokes. I've been there. I won't say names because I want to continue working in places, but I've been in group things myself where what triggers you, and people saying, well, blood or meat, and you're thinking, well, I can't talk about anything, but this is where it's the same type of blokes on the same sort of platform. And I know that there will be a lot of therapeutic discussion and inspirational discussion that will happen from this, and we're going to document it, and then we're going to present it, and then we're going to keep building it, and that's how it's going to happen. So, as I say, you got the two stews from Kajaki, you got Dunk Slater, well known to all, ex-RAF Reg 6 Platoon SFSG, lost both legs, done a marathon de Sable 3 times on prosthetic legs. He's an inspirational guy. And these are the resilient skills that you have. Most blokes leave, go into CP, and thinks that's their total skill set. In actual fact, you've got a place in your own communities, in your own schools. Let me just show you something, Chris. So this is a brand new magazine that is now out all the time. Okay, it's called Veteran UK. This one was obviously 8th anniversary. That's us featured in it. Okay, and the reason being is we were contacted by this think tank of ex-generals, Trident submarine commander, CEOs of different companies, and out of all the charities that they kind of researched, our resilience program is one that they want to push nationally into schools. Okay, to basically put community responsibility into young people and build a stronger Britain over time, because they're having those resilience lessons. So what we do in all our resilience, this is the youth focus group, which is more the troubled kids that aren't in normal education, or the ones that are still in the high school but going a little bit wayward. And now we're also latching on to the kids. They're actually doing perfectly well, but we're doing it with them as well, because the more we reach out, the further impact it has. We basically get them in, teach them mnemonic clap, but we do it for communication. So you talk clearly, loud, as a direction, but with pauses, so they can start communicating. Phonetic alphabet. And then we start doing scenarios built around blue light handovers to all 3 services: fire brigade, medics, police, or 2, or 1, hemorrhage control, crowd control, de-escalation of argument and stuff like that. We work with Blind Veterans UK, where we get train them up to guide blind people, and they start focusing on actually a very light case of thing. If I'm setting off an alarm in a block of flats, I wouldn't have considered somebody might be deaf, or might be blind, or might be pregnant, or might have a young baby, or might be old and on their, So they start seeing the community a lot different. We do orientation, where we do, because we get them fitter and stronger as well. We run about, and they know where all the defibs are in town, and they become like local little heroes, and then they mentor the next group, and it keeps growing. So it was born in Littlehampton. We got a load of blokes, mainly reg infanteers as well, over in Brighton, setting up as we speak. We got ones that are now going to look to start up over in Pompey, and we're wanted up in London. But at the moment, we're going on to the steer group of veteran force to then push it out with the right funding and the right backing to do it, because you've got to all be on the same song sheet, but we don't micromanage, because we pick the right people that are all vetted in the first instance, have taken their oath, done their training, have served a minimum of colour service, lest they've been injured during that time. Therefore, we regard you as a veteran. Therefore, we know you have the skill set to put that resilience in those kids. And that's what we do. And there's other things like our allotment project that we've done. We awarded a big grant from Morrison's. Allotments were initially given to World War I veterans coming back, so they had sustainability or could create income. So our aim is to have a VBS allotment in every county throughout England as well. I'll send you some bits on it, and you can go onto our website and have a look. Keep being updated, and a picture, paints 1,000 words and stuff. It's getting completed in the next 2 weeks. The community are involved. They come up, speak to veterans. Gets veterans, the older boys, with something to go and do. After these guys are widows and stuff like that, they get to then work with a youth focus. We get them up there. They help. And then you're producing stuff for people that are feeling poverty or need a bit of help, and all the rest of it as well. But we have events up there, and it brings everybody together. And this is all round the term veteran. So veteran to us, in a nutshell, is an employable title. And that's what our aim is, to get it out there and make that happen.
Well, honestly, it sounds absolutely fantastic. I have read like bits and bobs about it, and we have been in discussion, and you've been kind of shedding a light on it for me. But like, to hear it explain it, firstly, to see how passionate you are about it, obviously it means a hell of a lot to you. But to hearing it explained the way that you explain it, it kind of makes more sense to me. That's how my brain works. And I guess a lot of people like that will see this and will understand it better than reading it. And what a fantastic idea, because veterans do have a lot to give, a lot of life knowledge, a lot of wisdom, and they're thought highly of by the younger generation, perhaps not so much, but that's just because they probably don't understand. But that's when you go in and you explain, and then they get the kind of gist and the kind of understanding. And no, I think it's absolutely fantastic. And obviously the powers that be, Gary, obviously think it's a brilliant idea as well, if they're showing an interest and they want to push it out nationally. So no, hats off, pal. Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and we're very lucky. Canon Roger Hall, who's the King's Chaplain, is our patron. We were lucky to get his involvement. So really, we're lucky enough, our London office, if you like, is the Tower of London. And we've got an event that will be happening, looking at the 16th of November this year. There'll be certain people invited to that, and the aim of it, again, we've got Laba Talassi's bicentenary medal, who was killed in Murbach. So we're kind of doing a little ceremony out of the Thetford Tower due to his Irish regiment roots before the SAS. His great nephew has come with some of his family, and then we're repatriating at that service to Tower London, where it's going to be kept and looked after for the rest of the time, though he's remembered and everything like that. Yeah, we've got some quite big people from Fiji that have been in touch about it. So it's like, it's little things like that we do. It's all about remembering the spiriting of that proper fighting soldier and what that person has to offer. And imagine this, Chris, resettlement was changed from not only the course that you're going to do, but then if you engage but paid kind of part-time in a role in the VVS for a year, doing those resilience things, you would leave much more in touch with your identity. You still recognise yourself and be your current in-date medical quals, leadership skills, all the rest of it. I think you would hit the ground running a lot more better than what is currently in place, and that is also something we're challenging.
Yeah, you know what, you've nailed on the head there. I think for everyone, and I can relate wholeheartedly to what you said. When I left the military, for them first few months before I went on the close protection circuit, I was completely lost. I had maybe 3 or 4 jobs in Civistry where I didn't fit in. They felt like pointless kind of, and I'm not taking anything away from the people that do them jobs, but for me, I didn't fit in. I walked out of them gates, and I suspect for the first few years, for military personnel, them first few years are hard. And this is where you see a lot of veterans go downhill and sadly kind of struggle with mental health, because they're not surrounded by like-minded individuals. They've not got purpose like they had in the military. They've got a job and there is a purpose behind that job, but it's not the same. Building a wall or, labouring on a building site is not the same purpose as going into a combat zone and an operation.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, so that bridge, definitely a bridge the gap.
Exactly. Yeah. If you were doing that, people need to work and they need to re-establish themselves. But I think if they were doing once a week or twice a week, getting involved with the youth focus groups in their community, having the respect as a veteran, well, I know this because we've been to the Home Office and we've pitched and we know the stats. Those stats would change dramatically, and that's why Veteran Force have sourced us to get involved, and kind of do that. And it was, and that's just how it's unravelled, and that's why it's rolling on and gaining gravitas all the time and more ears and everything.
No, absolutely brilliant, Gary. Thank you so much for coming on and explaining it all. It's been fantastic chatting to you. Just for the viewers and the people that are going to watch the podcast, where can they find your links? I will put the links on there at in the description as well. So for everyone that's watching, please go to the comments and in the bio and take a look at all the links and click on and go and look at the brilliant stuff that Gary's doing. But just off the top of your head there, what are your links, pal?
Just literally Veterans Volunteer Service. Google it, it'll come up straight away. Go on our website, find us on Facebook. Obviously, follow any links on podcasts. If the blokes tell you, if it feels like something you want to do, get in touch with us, and we'll start helping you help us and helping, therefore, the old school values from the greatest generation back in our communities. So yeah, get in touch.
Awesome stuff, Gary. Look, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to come on and explain what you're doing. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I'm not just saying that. I genuinely think it's needed, not just for the community that you're kind of helping and kind of helping the younger generation kind of understand and kind of giving them a bit of guidance, but also from a veteran's perspective where you're kind of helping bridge that gap. That very, very difficult gap between the military and Civvy Street. I think you've kind of tapped into something there that's massively important, and you're covering such a wide spectrum of stuff. No, I think it's fantastic, Paul. So hats off, and again, thank you very much for taking the time to come on.
Cheers, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much.